a very healthy, prosperous new year filled with peace and love. Okay, we'll get started. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Mavit Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We'll do the 3 verses from the Gita Dhyanam. These verses are our humble offering to the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, then to the author of Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, sage Vedavyasji, and the third one is our ultimate offering to Lord Krishna, the teacher of Bhagavad Gita. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavatveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Fullara Vindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Brudatu He Namaha. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Moksha Ishyami Ma Shuchaha. So welcome to everyone to this session of Bhagavad Gita. So we started with the first chapter last week. We saw how Kurukshetra, the war zone where previously a number of wars had taken place, where there is a lot of noise and heat and dust. You can actually smell the raw fear and the great courage hanging thick and heavy in all those soldiers arrayed there. You can feel the nervous excitement of the soldiers. You can hear the whining of the horses and the trumpeting of the elephants. You can hear even the clank of the battle armor. All of them getting ready for this Dharma Kshetra in this field of Kurukshetra. And while this is all going on, we see far away, about 100 miles away, King Dhritarashtra. He's sitting in his cool palace. And along with him, who is there? Well, we have none other than the cool and the calm Sanjaya, who has been given the ability to not just see physically what is happening in that Kurukshetra, but he can also visualize what is happening in the minds of the people, because that's what we want to know. So he has what is called as a virtual television, the Doordarshan, by which he can actually see everything that is going on. So who is this Sanjaya? And why has he been given this post? Well, he is that person who is a Raga Dveshadi Jitawan. He's the one who has conquered his likes and dislikes. And it's only a person like him who can be so balanced in his commentary to Dhritarashtra. So that is what was needed, and this is why he was given that post. Now, why would he give this to Dhritarashtra? Because Dhritarashtra was blind, not just physically blind, but this blindness indicates something else. And that blindness is his essential passion to his children, which really blinds his thinking. It dilutes his thinking as a king, and therefore Sanjaya gives him this power, gives him this ability to visualize what is happening over there. And this blindness also is sort of represents the ignorance which we don't want to accept. We don't want to accept that we don't know things. And therefore, it is this ignorance that actually leads to the war being inevitable. So the significance of this war, as much as it is happening outside, what does it mean for us? How can we relate to this war happening to us? Well, you see, friends, we can relate to this in everyday life. We can see that even happening today in our lives. Today, even as we speak, the war which is happening outside. The war which is happening outside, which is representative of something which is happening inside. When we are unable to see ourselves as beyond our own bodies, our own mind, our own intellect, we tend to make these distinctions within our family, but also within our community, in our country, in the world. So with all this relates to a kind of a divided society. So in this sense, we are fighting a war all this time. And unlike Arjuna, who is facing this war outside, and then later on he realizes that this war is inside, for us, the various situations that we face gives us opportunities to recognize the two sides or the two choices that we have to make within whatever it is. It may be as small as something as going to whether I should go to the grocery store, should I wear a mask? Of course, the question of mask doesn't arise anymore. We all are wearing a mask, but still the choices arise in so many different ways. Choices making to have the right ruler for our country, so many different things. So in all this, the choices that we make is the inner war that we go through. In all this also, the other thing that we face is the fact that the responsibilities or the duties which we face as the dharma, what we have to do in our life, it goes through depending upon the two aspects, which is the varna and the ashrama. Varna indicating not necessarily the caste system as it is discussed, but in a sense, the abilities that we possess. How do we exercise those abilities in the workplace? So that's the varna part of it. And the ashrama part of it is the different stages in life. So depending upon the different stages in life, depending upon the different abilities that we possess and how we exercise those abilities in any form of, whether it's the workplace or in our relationships, in our community. Depending upon that, we face the challenges as well. So the significance of this war comes in all these areas. And this is what we really see in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So let us start. Let us look, just very quickly review what we already did last week. When we see the shlokas, for us, in the first, when we look at it, it looks like, I know this, yes, dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamakaha pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. So when this first shloka, Dhritarashtra asks on the holy plain of Kurukshetra, where not only my sons, but also the sons of Pandu, where they have arrayed together to fight, O Sanjaya, tell me what is happening. You see already that Sage Vyasa's artistry here. If we did not know Mahabharata, then we would just read this at the surface level. But now that we know the story and the personality, we can see why Dhritarashtra is saying this. So with this, we started with the very first verse where Dhritarashtra speaks the one and only time. And from here on, we moved on to now Sanjaya giving a report of what is happening. So he starts in a very diligent way of reporting about Duryodhana. You can see Duryodhana being now restless. He is wanting to start the war. And Duryodhana could have actually first described about his own army. If he was really so proud of his army, he could have started describing all the great heroes who were there. But you see how Sanjaya, through beautiful Vyasa's artistry in looking at this shloka itself, he says, Drishtva tu Pandavanikam vyudham Duryodhanastada Acharyam upasangamya Raja vachanam abravit. You see Sanjaya telling his Acharya Dronaji about the fact that there are Pandavas, and these Pandavas are arrayed in a certain formation. And with that, he tells him in the next verse about Pashyaitan Panduputranam Acharya Mahatim Chamum Vyudham Drupada Putrena Tava Shishyena Dhimata. Again, on the face of it, it looks like Duryodhana is just telling his Acharya, look at the Pandavas on the other side, and look at the son of Drupada, who is none other than your own disciple. And not only that, he's a wise disciple. Okay, what does that mean? So, knowing now the inner meaning of what this means is, we saw about how Duryodhana, in his restlessness, in his anxiety, and in his kind of a fear of whether he's going to win this battle or not, he tells his Acharya about how his own disciple is on the other side. And not only that, he is rather intelligent. So, what is our chances? What are our chances of winning the war? And the Pandavas, of course, they were trained by none other than you. Do you think we can really win the war? So you see the beginnings of, or the rumblings of the personality of Duryodhana, where when a person is not strong enough, who doesn't have strength in his own self, such a person can get immediately agitated by what is happening on the external side. And then in shlokas 4 to 6, Duryodhana again goes on elaborating about all the Pandavas who are there. We saw Atra Shura Maheshwasaha, Bhima Arjuna Samayudhi, Yuyudhano Viratascha, Drupadascha Maharatha. So just like Bhima and Arjuna, Bhima Arjuna Samayudhi, just like Bhima and Arjuna, Atra Shura, there are so many more heroes. Maheshwasaha, great ones. Yuyudhana is one of them. Virata, Drupadascha, Drupada himself, all of them great Maharatha. And then in shloka 5, we saw about some more of these generals. Drishtaketush, Chekitanaha, Kashirajascha, Viryavan, Purujit, Kunti Bhojascha. Kunti Bhoja is the father of Kunti. Shaibya, Narapungavaha. All of them, each of them so great warriors. And then in 6, he talks about the sons of Draupadi. He talks about Abhimanyu. So, Yudhamanyuscha Vikrantaha, Uttamaudascha Viryavan, Saubhadro Draupadeyascha, Sarva Eva Maharathaha. So he continues to tell about the greatness of all these people. And then the 7th verse, which is where we left off last time, he then starts to talk about his own army. And over here, you can see the pride and the ego in him that comes out. Asmakam tu vishishtaye, tani bodha dvijotama, Nayaka mama sanyasya sanyartam tan bravimite. So he's going to start listing the important people in his own kingdom. So the idea is he wants to compare and contrast the relative strengths of both the army. It's like this, even in sports, right? Even in cricket. You always want to see who is the better player, who is the greater player, each one, who is a great batsman or a fast bowler, or if it's a football, depending upon who is manning the net, who is the fast thrower, all this basketball. In all this, there's always a comparison of the strengths. And that's what you see, which is out here. Duryodhana is wanting to do that. The interesting thing we pointed out last time was this word Dvijotama. You can see Drona is quiet all through when Duryodhana is talking. And here, first, in the last few shlokas, we saw him, Duryodhana, taunting Drona with saying that, you made a mistake in teaching all those disciples, like Pandavas and Drishtadyumna and everyone. And in this shloka, he taunts him by saying that, hey, Acharya, are you really fit to be one of our commanders in our army? Too late to ask, right? But look at him, look at the cheek. Look at how he can even taunt his own guru. He calls him Dvijotama, indicating that he's a Brahmana. Now, this is why I explained earlier about how our responsibilities in life depends upon the Varna and the Ashrama. Varna is the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaisya, Shudra class, right? So here, he's trying to show that his teacher is not fit to lead the army because he's a Brahmana. So what does Brahmanas do? Well, Brahmanas, as has been listed out in our scriptures, there are 6 duties for a Brahmana. They are Yajanam, Yajanam, Patanam, Patanam, dhanam, and pratigraha. Essentially, Brahmanas are supposed to do these 6 things. Not only are they supposed to spend their time studying, but they're supposed to teach. That is where the yajanam and patanam and patanam comes here. Yajanam and yajanam is doing the rituals and pujas, and then yajanam means teaching also the various other classes what their duties are in the society. And then you have the dhanam. Brahmanas are supposed to give, and they can receive, which is pratigraha. They can also receive charity. So this is what they're supposed to do. So you see, in none of those descriptions or roles and responsibilities is mentioned anything about leading a war. So this is what Duryodhana is pointing out. And also, a Brahmana is supposed to have more sattvic qualities because he's supposed to study, teach, and therefore, Duryodhana also points to the aspect that, hey, Drona ji, you're not really fit to lead an army. And then, after having said that, you can see the restlessness again in Duryodhana's mind, the agitation which is making him say these things. And all this because he has seen the army, and that brings a certain sense of a feeling of insecurity and inadequacy. So now let us see how he's now introducing his own army to Dronaji, as if Dronaji doesn't know this. But here is the feeling of the person who is not of a stable mind. You can see the psychological behavior of Duryodhana coming through. Bhavan Bhishmascha Karnascha Kripascha Samitinjayah. Bhavan Bhishmascha Karnascha Kripascha Samitinjayah. Ashwathama Vikarnascha Saumaditta Saumadattistataivacha. Ashwathama Vikarnascha Saumadattistataivacha. So he introduces first. He now kind of recognizes that he may have committed a mistake. He wasn't being respectful towards his own Acharya. Acharya who has taught him the art of warfare and who has been with him from the time when he was young and has really given him all the secrets of warfare. So he backtracks a little bit and he calls and he says, Bhavan, O Dronaji, O Acharyaji, Bhavan, then you yourself. And who else? Bhishma Pitamaha, the great Bhishma, and Karna, and Kripacharya. Samitinjayaha to indicate how Kripacharya, and again there are 2 readings on this from the commentaries that I read. Kripa referring to Kripacharya. Samitinjayaha basically indicates the one who is ever victorious in war. That means a person who has never been defeated. That is a Samitin Jayaha. Samitihi means Yuddhaha, so which means a Samitin Jayaha means someone who is really undefeated in war. And then Ashwathama, who is a great warrior. Vikarna. Vikarna is none other than another son of Dhritarashtra and who is a brother of Duryodhana. And then Somadatta is another warrior. And then Tathaivacha indicating so many other warriors, indicating Jayatratha and so many others which has been listed in Mahabharata. We won't go into all these details, but basically he wanted to indicate, saying that these are all the warriors who are also there, and to show that, well, our army also has a lot of these warriors. And then continuing, he says, not only them, but we have many more. Anye cha bahava shuraha madharte tyakta jivitaha. Anye cha bahava shuraha madharte tyakta jivitaha. Nana shastra praharnaha sarve yuddha visharadaha. Nana shastra praharnaha sarve yuddha visharadaha. Anyecha bahava shuraha. So anyecha meaning that there are many more heroes, and then shuraha indicating heroes. Tyakta jivitaha, madarte tyakta jivitaha. For my sake, they are all willing to give up their lives. Tyakte jivitaha. Then nana shastra praharanaha. They all have many nana. Nana means vidamana. Many different kinds. Shastra praharanaha. Many different shastras and praharanas. And sarve yuddha visharadaha. And they're all yuddha visharadaha. Well skilled in these battles. So he lists that not only are they people, there are many more people, but there are also so many different different kind of weapons. So the difference between shastra and prakarna is you have the shastra. Shastra is a weapon which is held in the hand and it is fought. It is never released from the hand, but it is always held in the hand. Like, for example, the sword or the mace and etc. And then prakarnas, on the other hand, are things that are thrown at them, but when they do it with actually some mantras associated. So they are all basically mantra-based technologies, compared to what we have now, which is nuclear-based technologies. Like, for example, in India, whereas we have this Agni missile, which is nuclear, which is basically a technology-driven missile. But the same Agni Shastra in the previous time was something which they would invoke the fire god and then shoot that arrow. And soon you will see that the whole place can get blazoned with fire. And then sometimes the enemies would come and put it off with something called as a Varuna Shastra. So these are the different ways in which those days they used to fight. So that is what is indicated in this particular thing here. In fact, I think in Ramayana, there is a beautiful example about how Sri Rama takes a blade of grass and then invokes the powerful Lord Brahma, and then he just releases the blade of grass. As you know, grass by itself doesn't really have any strength, but then having the invocation of powerful Brahma, the blade of grass now becomes like a Brahma Shastra. So you see, this is the way these things used to be used before, and that's Duryodhana is pointing out a lot of this in this shloka here. Moving on, now you see a very interesting twist by Duryodhana. It again indicates this aspect of confusion in Duryodhana's mind. So let us read the shloka. Aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishmabhirakshitam. Aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishmabhirakshitam. Paryaptam tvidametesham. Paryaptam tvidametesham. Balam bhimabhirakshitam. Aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishmabhirakshitam. Paryaptam tvidame tesham balam bhima birakshitam. So the interesting word here is the word paryaptam. But before we come to paryaptam, one thing to note here is that in the armies, even though each army had a commander in chief, essentially there were two powerful people in each of these armies. So on the side of Kauravas, you had Bhishma Pitamaha, who was a very powerful man of valor and courage. And he basically was a kind of a defender, if you will. And then on the other side, they had Bhima. And so these are the two great men of powerful men of valor who are pitted against each other in the army itself. So Sanskrit here has a beautiful way of explain. We can look into the language of Sanskrit itself. So the word paryaptam, which is mentioned in both the first line and the second line, in the first line it is aparyaptam, in the second line it is paryaptam. So this has basically two meanings. It can mean either sufficient or it can also mean limited. So depending on however you look at it, it basically is a nice play in how these words have been coined here to show that Duryodhana was basically flipping on both ways. At one time, he's thinking that, oh, we have a great army because Bhishma is there. And because Bhishma is there, it is unlimited. Aparyaptam means unlimited. Paryaptam means limited. So in one way, he's looking at it and he's saying, oh, our army is unlimited. It is infinite. And Bhishma is so powerful, who's so intelligent. So we have such a great army. It could also mean that saying that our army is so much more bigger. Because if you remember, we said that the Kaurava army had 11 Akshauhinis, huge, much, much bigger than the Pandava army, which was only had 7 of them. And so aparyaptam can indicate infinite. On the same lines, paryaptam means limited. Therefore, the Pandava army is limited. But looking at it differently, paryaptam can mean sufficient and aparyaptam can mean insufficient. So if we use that meaning for paryaptam and aparyaptam, that could probably indicate that even though the Pandava armies seem small, but it is sufficient. It's paryaptam. But our army, even though we have Bhishma and it is much bigger, it is insufficient. So both these are beautiful readings which have been brought out in two different commentaries by Sridhar Swamiji as well as Anandagiri. They both have taken this in two different ways, and I thought I should present that to you as well. But the interesting thing, I think, also is that it really indicates a mental confusion in this from many different ways. So even though he feels extremely overconfident, but Duryodhana recognizes that our cause for fighting this war is unjust, is really, we have a very weak cause. So even though Bhishma is protecting us and success is for sure, he doesn't feel that his army really is motivated to win. And therefore, there is a confusion in his mind. In comparison, in the case of Pandavas, they are really motivated to win for many reasons. One of them is that they're fighting for justice. So that itself motivates you to fight even more. And second thing is Lord Krishna is on their side. So that's a great motivation to fight. So there are so many different ways in which this shloka can be looked at, both from an intellectual standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. When I say intellectual, indicating, the size of the armies, and then emotional standpoint to indicate that the Pandava army is emotionally really geared to fight because they feel they're fighting for a just reason. So now moving on to, again, showing about Duryodhana's insecurity, or Duryodhana's feeling of a little bit of a desperation, indicating that, recognizing that Bhishma Pitamaha is a powerful person in his army, he wants to now protect him. So the shloka goes, Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagamavasthitaha Bhishma beva bhirakshantu bhavantah sarva eva hi. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yata bhagamavasthitaha Bhishmameva bhirakshantu bhavantah sarva eva hi. So, ayaneshu cha sarveshu. In the several armies, in several divisions of the army, which are stationed in respective positions, yatha bhagamavastitaha Bhishmam eva abhirakshantu. Protect Bhima the most with a lot of alertness. Bhavanta sarva evahi. So he's now asking his army chiefs, everyone, to take up positions in such a way that they all protect Bhima, because he realizes that not only that Bhishma Pitamaha is powerful and is full of valor, but all the army chiefs, they respect him more than they respect Duryodhana. So he recognizes that, and therefore he wants to make sure that that is taken care of. And now, while this was all going on, you see that Bhishma Pitamaha was actually standing next to him. And he sees how Duryodhana is really making a fool of himself. He's putting his army into a kind of an uncomfortable mood of really desperate unhappiness. And not only that, Bhishma Pitamaha notices that Drona, Acharya Drona, is silent throughout. And he realizes that he now needs to save this situation somehow or the other, because Duryodhana is breaking down psychologically and he might collapse. So he must be really enthused and pulled out of his confusion. So you see Sanjaya saying the next verse here. Sanjaya uvacha tasya sanjanayan harsham tasya sanjanayan harsham kuru vridha pitamaha simhanadam vinadhyochaihi shankham dadmau pratapavan Sanjaya uvacha tasya sanjanayan harsham kuru vridha pitamaha simhanadam vinadhyochaihi shankam dadmau pratapavan. So how did he cheer Duryodhana? Sanjaya says, Tasya sanjanayan harsham. So in order to create harsha means joy, tasya sanjay harsham Kuru Vriddha Pitamaha. Kuru, indicating the Kuru dynasty, the eldest of Kuru dynasty, who is Bhishma Pitamaha, Kuru Vriddha Pitamaha. Now, he basically sounded his conch, Shankar, Simhanadam Vinadya Uchchaihi. So, Simhanadam, Simha meaning lion. So his conch, which was which had a sound of a lion roar, he just blew on his conch. Shankam Dadmau Pratapavan. Interestingly, this Shankar, word Shankar, is it's basically Sham Kha. It's Kha referring to the space, and Sham is referring to Shanti. Shankha is Sham plus Kha is Shankha. And the metaphor or the way to understand this word is so beautiful. So that particular instrument which breaks the Shanti. So that fissure which is there in the Shankar, which you see that or the breaking in that Shankar itself, that's really the space which is in that Shankar. So by blowing on the conch, he actually broke the peace. Well, figuratively speaking, but in a sense, the sound breaks the sound, breaks the silence. So that's what Shankar here really refers to. So Bhishma Pitamaha now breaks the silence, or breaks this whole aspect of where this between the conversation, what he's watching, everything that is happening between Drona and Duryodhana, and he breaks it by first blowing the conch. And by blowing the conch, he wants to first enthuse Duryodhana and also bring in the confidence in the whole army itself. And more importantly, this by blowing the conch, it signals the start of the war. And so you see that Kauravas are the first one to start it, and they are really the aggressors. And it is said that Bhishma Pitamaha, at this time when he was when in the war, he was already about 150 years old. And he blew his conch only with one hand, indicating the strength and indicating, the type of people who lived at that time. So let's move on to the next shloka. Now the Kauravas are the aggressors, and we'll see what happens after once Bhishma blew his conch. Tatha shankascha beryascha Panavanaka gomukhaha Tatha shankascha beryascha Panavanaka gomukhaha Sahasaivabyahanyanta 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 Sashabdastumulo bhavat Sashabdastumulo bhavat Tatha shankascha beryascha Panavanaka gomukhaha Sahasaivabyahanyanta Sashabdastumulo bhavat. So as soon as Bhishma Pitamaha blew his conch, then each one started blowing their own conches. Various instruments were used to inspire, and tatha meaning thereafter, shankaha, shankashcha, various type of conches, bheryashcha, which is basically the kettle drums, and then there were many others like cow horns and also many other type of instruments. And all this, like he said, the military drums, tabors, all these were used, all to inspire basically a fear complex in the enemy. And the sound was so great that it was tumultuous. And I have to say about this word tumultuous, I looked up the dictionary about what is the origin of this word tumultuous, is nothing but tumula. So tumula, which is mentioned here, is also possibly an origin for the word tumultuous, indicating that it was so great. The sound was really great, too much. And moving on to now the next shloka. Now that Bhishma has blown his conch and the introduction of everyone is done, now we have our hero coming to the scene. We have none other than Arjuna, but more importantly, we have Lord Krishna and Arjuna now coming to the scene here. So you can imagine a magnificent chariot coming into the scene, which is harnessed by white horses and who have both Madhava, Lord Krishna, and Arjuna seated, and they are going to blow this conches. So Sanjaya looks at the scene, and in his heart, he thinks, okay, even at this moment, will not King Dhritarashtra change his mind? But that is only a thought which is in his mind. He doesn't necessarily say it out, but you can see by this description of the entrance of Arjuna with Lord Krishna, how he says this. Tata shvetair harai yukte, tata shvetair harai yukte, mahati syandane stitau, mahati syandane stitau, madhava pandavaschaiva, madhava pandavaschaiva, divyau shankau pratau, divyau shankau pradatmatuhu, madhava pandavaschaiva, divyau shankau pradatmatuhu, tatha shvetair harai yukte, mahati syandane stitau, madhava pandavaschaiva, divyau shankau pradatmatuhu. So tatha, then, shvetair harai yuktair. Even a film director cannot create this atmosphere that Sanjaya does by giving this description of this magnificent chariot with his white horses. So they both, you can imagine them galloping into that scene there, and with both, and they both blowing their conches. And in their Mahati Syandane Sthitau, the magnificent chariot, Madhavaha and Pandava, both of them, they blew their divine conches. And both of the divine conches, they were definitely in a much, Lord Krishna's was in a much higher tone. And in this, you can see that from now on, you will see how Sanjaya actually describes not just the people, but he also describes the names of the conches that people, that the Pandava army are using, the different people in the Pandava army. So the next one, which I will read from Shloka 15, the first line here, and then the next line in the next page. Panchajanyam Rishikeshaha Devadattam Dhananjayaha Panchajanyam Rishikeshaha Devadattam Dhananjayaha. Interestingly, this chariot example will come later in Bhagavad Gita itself. But in Kathopanishad, you can see how this chariot is an example of our whole human life. Our physical body is really compared to the chariot. The sense organs are compared to the horses. The mind is compared to the reins. And the sense organs are driven with the help, and they're controlled with the help of, controlled by the mind here. And the sense organs basically represent the knowledge, and the knowledge is essentially the white in color. So that's the description of the horses and the chariot itself. But we will come to it later. I just wanted to give you this here. So we see Madhavaha referring to Lord Krishna. And of course, the description of Madhava in Vishnu Sahasranamam is so beautiful that at least 3 times the word Madhava comes in Vishnu Sahasranamam. Hiranya Garbha Bhugarbo Madhavo Madhusudanaha in 72 shloka of Vishnu Sahasranamam. 72nd, yes, 72nd name in Vishnu Sahasranamam. Then the other one, Vedyo Vaidya Sada Yogi Viraha Madhava Madhusudanaha. And Lokabandhur Lokanato Madhava Bhakta Vatsalaha. So many different beautiful ways to describe Lord Krishna. And Madhava also represents, Ma represents Lakshmi Devi, and Madhava therefore means the Lord of wealth. So all these beautiful descriptions for Lord Krishna here. And so, and here again we have Panchajanyam, which is referring to the conch of Lord Krishna. The Panchajanyam is the conch that Lord Krishna received when he was in Sandipani, when he was studying, because he helped save the son of his guru. And Devadattam Dhananjayaha. Devadatta, the conch of Dhananjaya, who is none other than Arjuna. And then coming to the next one, Poundram Dadmo Mahashankam Bhima Karma Vrikodharaha. Poundram Dadmo Mahashankam Bhima Karma Vrikodharaha. Poundram Dadmo, that is the conch of Bhima. And here Bhima is called, Vrikodhara. The description that is being given to him is interesting. It's Vrikodharaha, Vriko referring to wolf. So Bhima apparently had a stomach of a wolf, indicating that he was so strong and again could kill, or it is said that apparently he drank the blood of Dushasana or something. So that again indicating the wolfness of Bhima himself. So that's the conches of the various of the people in the Pandava army. Next, moving on to shloka number 16. Ananta Vijayam Raja Kunti Putro Yudhishthiraha. Ananta Vijayam Raja Kunti Putro Yudhishthiraha. Nakula Sahadevascha Sughoshamani Pushpakau. Nakula Sahadevascha Sughoshamani Pushpakau. So here, Ananta Vijaya, this is the name of the conch of Yudhishthira. Okay, Raja Yudhishthira, Kunti Putra, Yudhishthira, who is the son of Kunti Putra, and Nakulaha Sahadevashta Sughosha Mani Pushpakau. Nakula and Sahadeva, their conches are this beautiful Sughosha, which has a very beautiful sound, and Mani Pushpakau, which is the conch of Sahadeva. So interestingly, again, Yudhishthira is Yudhishthiraha, meaning one who was always firm, and Stiram, he one who remains Stiram in Yuddha. So that is why his name is Yudhishthiraha. And he blew his conch, which is Ananta Vijaya. Ananta Vijaya indicating Ananta meaning infinite, victory. Ananta Vijaya, which is victory. So he blew, so all of them started blowing their own conches. Now we'll see the next two shlokas quickly. काश्यश्च परमेश्वासः शिखण्डी च महारथः काश्यश्च परमेश्वासः शिखण्डी च महारथः दृष्टद्युम्नो विराटश्च सात्यकीश्चापराजितः दृष्टद्युम्नो विराटश्च सात्यकीश्चापराजितः. So here, the next, all the other Pandava army generals, they blow their conches. And who are they? They are the king of Kashi, and then Shikhandi, who is the mighty chariot warrior. Drishtadyumna, again we talked about Drishtadyumna is Drupada's son. Then Virata and Satyaki, all of them great warriors. And next week when we meet back, I will just give a little more description on all these warriors. But moving on to the next shloka here, continuing with who else was there. Drupado Draupadeyascha Drupado Draupadeyascha Sarvasha Prithivipate Saubhadrascha Mahabahuhu Shankan Dadmuh Pratak Drupado Draupadeyascha Sarvasha Prithivipate Saubhadrascha Mahabahuhu Shankan Dadmuh Pratak. So you see here Drupada, the father of Draupadi, then the sons of Draupadi, and then Sarvasha Prithivipate, and then not only them but also the sons of Subhadra, and all of them, they now blew their own conches. So you can imagine how that whole war scene must have been there. On one hand, you had the Kaurava army blowing their conches, and then you have the Pandava army with their own, each one of them beautiful, unique conches with its own sound, and the divine sounds of Lord Krishna's conch must have really been an amazing scene out there to see and to witness and to experience, which Sanjaya is narrating to Dhritarashtra. So we'll see a little more about the description of the warriors next week, but we will be moving into now a very important part of what happens now that the conches have been blown, and what did Arjuna say? What did he want Lord Krishna to do? So that we will see next week. If anybody has any question, you can write to me or call me or WhatsApp me at this number. And I have created a Google Drive, and my plan is to not just put the presentations, but very soon I want to create a notes for each one of the lectures, maybe a one-page notes which will capture the important points, and I will put that as well. So that way, that will be also as a good reminder for you about this beautiful text of Bhagavad Gita. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kasyat Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Hari Om.